Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Come 17th of November 2021, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta will go to Parliament and present government's economic policy and budget statement. But what is going to be in this budget? Coming at this time, the issues about revenue, expenditure, rising budget deficit, and also the bit about the debts. And how can it also bring some confidence to those investors out there who are getting out of our bonds as well in these times? Some sort of assurance to businesses out there that going forward, things will be well. What are the challenges that lies ahead for us, as well as the expectations as the minister goes to Parliament to engage or present the budget? Well, I'm grateful to have here with me an economist, Professor Godfrey Bobkin. He is an economist and a finance lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, and also the chief executive of Association of Ghana Industries. That is Chuma Kobwa is also here with me in studio. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate so much. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. This is PM Express Business Edition, Budget 22, Expectations and Challenges Ahead. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition, and it's budget, and it's budget. And what are your expectations and the challenges that lies ahead for us as a business economy, as those are the SMEs and even individuals out there? In PM Express Business Edition, we're taking a look at what the minister is likely to table before Parliament for consideration. And what are the challenges that lies ahead for us? Now, Professor Godfrey Bobkin is an economist, a finance lecturer at University of Ghana Business School, and also Chuma Kobwa. He is Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries. A distinguished gentleman, economist, and an economist as well. For those who don't know, Chuma Kobwa is also an economist and also a business person as well. Thank you so much for your time. It's not a good time, I know, very busy schedule, but listen, you people have made the time to be in Sydney, and I really appreciate it. Let me start first with Professor Bobkin. I mean, why is this budget so much of a make or break for us in terms of stabilizing things?
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. I'm very grateful to be here and perhaps to provide some input also to the budget. Of course, the expectations are very high. At the same time, it's also needful to advise people to be moderate with the expectation, because broadly we know the outlook, broadly we know the challenges and all of that. So it's not like there's any magic button somewhere to go and press and then revenue will just start flowing like that. But that said, there are so many people who are interested in the 2022 budget because with COVID and all that happened and the uncertainty, the 2022 budget is giving us the opportunity to reflect deeply on the impact of COVID. And more so because three different issues have shaped the debt dynamics. The energy sector indebtedness, financial sector cleanup, and then also COVID. COVID also to the extent that we are taking advantage of COVID to embark upon certain expenditures that have all contributed to this. And therefore, the expectation is that the 2022 budget will provide some kind of a clarity and policy direction, particularly in anchoring expectations when it comes to government position and direction about a certain fiscal sustainability path that anchors the expectations of the market. So that is why people are looking forward to this, because already you can see the reactions in the secondary market. Okay, and that is what uncertainty does. Okay, and all of that. So if you're unable to manage that, then it can have some kind of...
Some bit of clarity is that these investors or these offshore investors who buy our bonds are having issues with the fiscal outlook, and some of them are getting out of our bonds.
Because already there's enough data.
Some pressure on the Ghana city. But the question you ask yourself, Prof, again, is that are these investors being fair? I mean, I stand to be educated. I'm not that old. I mean, has Ghana ever defaulted on its bonds? And I stand to educate it again. And look at the returns that they are getting in markets like Ghana. I mean, you cannot get that average 7% on these bonds compared to the U.S. market, even though it is quite stable for you. Sometimes, aren't they reacting unnecessarily, even though, yes, there are issues with our fiscal situation?
Yeah, there are underlying issues driving this sentiment that they are carrying on to the market, and you can ask them to be fair to you. These are investors who are making their own decisions here and there and all of that. But if the fundamental support the fact that the outlook is that much positive, certainly you will be rewarded. It's as simple as that. So I think the way it is now, I mean, you can even hold that constant, right?
Yeah.
We as domestic, even domestic investors, Ghanaians, private sector, academics, we are all concerned with that level of debt and how do we manage that. So we are all concerned. And so far, because the reason we are concerned is that in the last couple of years, the revenue envelope has not responded to the various reforms, even at the policy level, at the administration and compliance level. And yet expenditure is rising. So what is it? What is it that government is coming out with to sustainably address this issue? It's not only that. If you look at the report from Bank of Ghana and even the various...
there's a new one released today, fiscal situation.
You will see clearly that the central bank is concerned about the fiscal side.
You're worried. They've actually pointed out that we are heading towards some challenges.
Why would you say that these foreign investors are not being fair to us? Your own central bank is concerned because it has implications for the effectiveness of the monetary policy under the inflation targeting framework. Let me bring
in the chief executive of the Ghana AGI. And for you, I know for industry and businesses, for you, is it all about taxes, and that is all that you care about, or maybe a lot more going into this economic policy for the next 1 year?
Thank you very much, George, and good evening to your viewers. Of course, we are not only looking at taxes. Industry thinks about everything about the economy, because we are the worst losers if the economy is not in a stable condition. So we are also very concerned about all the issues that you've discussed, issues of the high debt level, how the debt will be financed. Is it going to be financed mainly or largely on local borrowings? What is the implication on businesses? Because when you overly compete with the private sector, it crowds out private sector access to finance, and it affects our businesses. So we are very concerned about that. We are also concerned about government expenditure. Where the expenditure is directed is key, because if you overspend, it means that you become a highly geared country, and in that situation, it makes your borrowings very expensive. When your borrowings are expensive, it must be financed anyway. How are you going to finance it? It could come in the form of taxes. So it's not just taxes, but the taxes is so very important. And then when it happens, so directing expenditure to productive sector that has proper multiplier effect, that impact on employment becomes a challenge. So we are concerned about all this. But we are also interested in government's own plans, because it's all about how you manage the situation. And I believe that government's management of the situation is key. So far, we've had good stability. In spite of the COVID, we've had some stability in the system. How do we sustain this stability and consolidate it and make sure that industry's expectations are met? This year's budget is of critical importance to us. It's going to be the first full year budget after the elections. We all know that during election year, things happen. But this is going to be the first full year. But of course, we had a budget this year, but that was March thereabout. This time around, there is no threat of election, and then therefore you don't need to respond to a particular section of society because you want to be able to win elections. So you have to be as realistic as possible. So people are really interested in what is going to happen and the kind of numbers and figures and the direction you're going to have as far as this year's budget is concerned. So indeed, industries are watching, and we are interested in all aspects of the development as far as the budget is concerned.
I'll be coming back to issues about taxes, because there are still speculations about the need to introduce more taxes. And that takes me to another question to you, Prof. Do you think that it's all about revenue going to this budget? Because it looks like we are still struggling to get around the revenue challenge. We will have all the data to show that, listen, as an economy, we are not mobilizing enough. But also, as an economy, are we trying much to cut the waste in the system?
Okay, so you can look at the expenditure side, and of course, the efficiency at that level, because there we are not doing well. But our biggest problem is domestic revenue mobilization. This has been a problem. And the reason is simple.
Prof, I started hearing this way back in school, and I started to be educated.
And you will continue to hear this. We'll continue to hear this. Look, 2 years ago, it was this same discussion, right? Yeah. And all of that. Because if you look at the various tax handles, you look at the inefficiency level, okay? And Ghana's problem with the tax...
Is it the collection or people don't want to pay? And I know the revenue guys are watching.
So at the policy level, I think...
Have you done what we're supposed to do as a country?
At the policy level, I think we've done quite well. The problem is more at the administration and compliance.
Okay.
That is where the problem is. And you can see that in terms of the tax gaps. So if you pick corporate tax, okay, we are getting far less than we're supposed to get from there. If you pick VAT, right, we are not just talking about maybe where the rate is, but the level of efficiency is very, very low. And you can explain that also through the various exemptions and all of that. I think we can talk about that. The bill, we heard about the bill.
I struggle as an economy that we are struggling to raise the required revenue. Yes, in the Chi language, they'll say that but aren't we giving away so much? And we've been able to do some analysis to establish what these exemptions are bringing into the economy.
There's data to suggest that we are losing as much as we're able to collect. And it's not like these leakages are going to the sea. No, you can trace that to individual pockets and all of that. Okay, so connivance between their officials and all of that. And the fact that, again, the exemptions is one area where people are abusing and all of that. Political patronage and all of that, they are all playing a role. Then you want to also look at the informal sector. That is also very huge, and we have not been able to collect the much needed tax from there. Beyond that, if you compare ourselves to our peers with similar level of informality, you realize that they are doing better than we are doing. In fact, the output gap relative to our peers is about 6%. Okay, and if you translate that to nominal terms, you are looking at something close to $6 billion additional tax revenue that we could generate relative to our peers, okay, that we are actually losing. And that is more than the total borrowing that we have done through Eurobonds and the rest of it. So there is potential to collect a lot more taxes without burdening the faithful few. But that is where we have not done quite well.
Sorry, you want to come?
The issue of the exemptions, I think that we have to put it in proper context. There has been arguments by, in certain quarters that why shouldn't we even scrap the exemptions completely? We are not so much
well-targeted.
It has to be well-targeted because exemption can also be used as a competitive tool to develop your industry, to develop your
capital
attraction and so many things. Can you imagine that if you are bringing machines to produce, the machines are not meant for sale. It is for production, and you have to pay duty on it. So if you don't have such an exemption arrangement, then it means the machines you are bringing, you are used to hard capital. So it's the abuse rate that we have to look at. So therefore, we really need to streamline the system. That's why the exemption bill, we are all for it. My other problem is that
you want a well-targeted.
It has to be well-targeted.
It has to be rationalized.
And then also, let's also look at the bureaucracies around it. I know the current government tried to streamline it a little bit. So they used a different approach. But then it's also creating a lot of bureaucracy, and it's not helping industries, and it's not making us competitive enough. We're competing for capital. And some of these are incentives to bring capital into your country. And therefore, if you have an exemption regime, that works very well. It streamlines things and makes it faster. It is better. Rather than saying, scrap it completely. We cannot scrap it. But let's streamline it and make sure that it serves the purpose that...
What is AGI proposal on the issue of, and I'll be coming back to you, Prof, the bit about revenue. What should be the strategy and the approach going? I know that by now the finance minister has already he's done the necessary cabinet briefings and all the rest. And maybe it might change things, your advice, it might not change things. Let's look at first revenue. We are still struggling. What should be the approach in the 2022 budget going forward? Is it about cutting expenditure, plugging the loopholes, or what when it comes to revenue, industry, businesses?
A combination of this must happen simultaneously. You really need to look at your expenditure. If you are not managing your expenditure well, no matter the revenue you generate, you will still not be able to have a stability. So that's critical. But the revenue side, as Doc said, there's a big gap between what we are supposed to collect and what we are able to collect. How do we bridge that gap? We, in industry, we also look at issues in the medium to long-term basis. You may be collecting some revenue immediately, but in the medium to long term, it may not be that helpful. So you need to look at ways of ensuring that the productive sector improves their capacity, increases their volumes, generate more resources, and then you can tax them more. We always talk about pre-production tax and post-production tax. We need to look at all these dynamics because the impact on productivity and the impact on the long-term revenue collection. If you only focus on 2022 budget and say, I want to target so much revenue, and therefore every effort should go into it, that is good, but look at it critically, because if you don't manage it well, you may be killing the very chicken that is laying the golden egg. So you really need to balance it very well and strategize in a way that helps you to have long-term revenue stream that is productive. I believe that the manufacturing sector can contribute a lot in revenue. It all depends on how you manage it. And if you introduce policies that does not help the growth of manufacturing sector, then your revenue will not be sustainable. We also have to improve the informality situation. We have too many informal sector operators in the system. How do we formalize their operation such that their contribution to revenue will be more sustainable?
So I'll be coming back to you on business confidence and also taxes as well, because I know another big issue, that the elephant in the room, is the benchmark value thing. What should be the approach going? But Prof, I mean, for you, what should be the approach when it comes to revenue going to this? More taxes, or rather focus on efficiency and plugging the loopholes?
Yes, I think as I said, the gaps are more at the administrative and compliance level than at the policy level. So to solve that, then you want to look at what kind of reforms can you do in terms of revenue administration and to improve compliance. And I think the Vice President has been spearheading one dimension, which is digitization. And all of that. So because the more you digitize your economy and all of that, then you are able to eliminate a lot of the human intervention, which tends to come between the taxpayer and then the consolidated fund. Let's put it that way. So, I mean, sometimes you hear that when people, GRA officials also go out there to go and collect, and people give them check, they are not comfortable, collecting that, they would rather want to take the cash, as whether the cash will actually end up where it's supposed to be, is a different thing altogether. But when we say we can collect more, the understanding is not to burden the faithful few, and I think that is just to assure my colleague here. So what it means is that there are quite a number of tax-paying people that are not really in the net, so to speak, and therefore are not putting their share of that on the table. And sometimes you can also consider high net worth individuals, even along the various classification, VVIPs and the rest of them. But broadly, if you pick almost all the tax handles, from VAT to corporate income tax and the rest of them, you realize that the productivity gap is very high.
No, the recent Bank of Ghana released a report just yesterday. Yes. We've not met all the targets. And
we are not asking for too much, because you are looking at the size of your economy. You're also looking at what portion of that you're able to convert to the tax revenue. You are benchmarking that against even your peers. And your peers is more or less like the first level comparison, because you share similar informality and all of that. We are doing less than 13%. Our peers are doing between 18 and 20%. Ghana's own theoretical tax frontier, our tax potential, is around 24, 25%.
Wow.
If we're able to do that, actually, we'll be generating a lot. Then, so once you are incapable of doing that, and you don't have control, I will use the word, you don't have control over your expenditure side, because the reason is simple. When it comes to interest payment and compensation of employees, what control do you have over there? And already these two line items are taking almost everything. So from the expenditure side, what are you managing? There is no flexibility. I mean, this is not the best time to be the Minister of Finance, because the level of rigidity is such that you don't have room to actually do much about even implementing government-owned policies and all of that, because two line items swallow practically everything.
80%,
and that is why you hear complaints from all over the place, even certain statutory transfers, okay, and under the current section, without borrowing, you will not be able to meet them. And that is why there are delays all over. When it happens that way, the trickle-down effect is held up, okay, and that is why there are complaints all over. And people are not feeling the impact of whatever progress that we are making at the grassroots level, because the trickle-down effect is not happening. And
what should be the approach going forward on taxes? I mean, obviously, there are rumors about government again wanting to introduce some new taxes. Again, we'll deal with the petroleum argument and all the rest and all those things. What should be the approach revenue mobilization, new taxes, hiking rates,
I will be
shouldn't go there?
I will be very careful in promoting the idea of new taxes and the rest of them, because even if you look at where our VAT is, and even if you add the straight levies.
They are talking about tax on tax. That's this whole argument.
The cascading effect and all of that. Look, you don't need to overburden the economy in the first place, because one, the effect of COVID was not exclusive to only the government. It also affected the private sector.
People are still recovering, and I'll come back to industry on that one.
You need to have a holistic understanding of the effect of the pandemic, so that your fiscal policy should be geared towards trying to undo the effect. This is a pandemic of inequality. So you also want to pursue a tax policy that is a bit more equitable and efficient, to the extent that it helps you to narrow the inequality. And why are we saying so? Because our level of inequality itself is affecting growth, because our inequality level is above the 27% or 0.27% threshold that the IMF says that if it goes beyond that, then it's going to affect growth negatively. So we are doing something above, we are level above 40%, 0.4, above that, and that itself is a bit anti-growth. So you want to use your tax policy to begin to also narrow the inequality by making your tax structure a bit more progressive than the current structure that we have, that is more reliant on indirect taxes. And
you think that
tends to disproportionately affect the poor, the marginalized, and socially excluded.
Do you think that it would be suicidal for the minister to propose some tax hikes on new taxes, or maybe robbing Peter to pay Paul?
We just came out of all kinds of taxes from the 2021 budget, right?
But what is your advice? Don't do new taxes. So don't hike rates. Focus on efficiency rather.
Focus on efficiency and reform, and be aggressive at compliance level. We need to do that and deploy greater digitization in that process. It's not only just at one end, right? Link that DVLA, Lands Commission, National Insurance Commission, right? And so that all these agencies, by way of data, should be talking to each other, so that we'll be able to track, because that is how you can rope in the informal sector and ensure that they are paying their taxes and all of that. Then we need to be aggressive. If we don't do that, we will be here next year talking about this same issue, and you realize that, and because as it stands now, if you look at it's unfortunate. The biggest expenditure item on our budget is interest payment. Come on, that is crowding out priority spending.
But what are we using the monies for?
Okay.
We are going to do a dollar-denominated bond on Tuesday, and
no, a lot of the borrowing we are doing right now is not really to say fresh, whatever.
But
we are borrowing to
debts that are maturing.
We are doing rollover.
Let me bring in Mr. Chumakoba. So industries. First let me ask industries, how are you doing? Are things indeed stabilizing, or, listen, there's a difference between the macro issues and the real issues on the ground? You are an economist as well, Mr. Koba.
Well, I think I will look at it from different angles. Confidence level, we saw some improvement. Last year was a bad year because of the COVID. The latter part of last year, our studies showed that there was some confidence level. It means that people were prepared to invest more and all that. Beginning of this year, it wasn't too bad. At this moment, it's virtually stable. It's not really going up. So it means that there are challenges. At the industrial level, we have challenges there, especially with the introduction of the benchmark values and all that. It's really affecting local industries.
How bad is that situation?
No, it's not good at all, seriously speaking.
Why? If you are competitive, some will say, why?
It's not a question of competitiveness.
Okay.
What the benchmark value sought to do was to reduce the cost of imports. So it meant that for the same amount of goods and at the level of a certain price, suddenly with the benchmark value reduction, it reduced the import cost or the duty on it by 50%, making the imports much cheaper. And we thought that was a wrong policy. Right from the onset, we started speaking against it.
What was the level of engagement in before? There wasn't anything?
There wasn't much engagement, honestly speaking.
Are you doing the engagement now?
Now we are doing engagement. Now we are doing serious engagement. Okay. Because we think that, you see, when it happened...
One's beating Swashai. Sorry, go ahead.
It came out of the blue, to be honest. And right from the onset, we spoke against it because we thought it was counter to government's own industrialization agenda. Government is doing 1F, in setting up factories across the country, doing planting for food and jobs and trying to link agriculture and industry. We also are in a situation of Continental Free Trade Agreement where you are trying to empower your people so that they can consolidate their market here and also export. Then suddenly you bring in benchmark value reduction. What it meant was that imports were supposed to be much cheaper than local production. And that's exactly what has happened. So goods that hitherto we had adequate market share is gradually dwindling. If you take the oil industry, those producing cooking oils, suddenly the market is gone because it's so easy and cheaper to import. So suddenly they are losing market. We have some of the rice millers. You know, we were gradually growing our local rice. And we got to a point where we thought after a few years' time we'll be able to catch up with the demand level. So we wouldn't even need to import. One of the major rice producers, since February this year, they have not produced at all because the market is taken away. This is the effect of the benchmark values. So, and government itself, you see, when this whole policy was announced, government made it clear, the key reason behind it was that there was diverting of cargo that were coming to Ghana to our neighboring countries. And then invariably they found themselves in the Ghana market, not paying the right duties and we were losing revenue. So the expectation was that with the introduction of the benchmark value and then with all the port reforms, we're going to have, you know, some volumes of cargo coming through our ports. 2 years down the line, it hasn't happened. So government revenue has not improved. On the contrary, government has lost serious revenue as a result of the introduction of the benchmark values. So we think that whilst losing revenue, you are also affecting local production, and some of the local companies are actually reducing their numbers of employees. That is the most critical part. Our government is talking about job creation, and that is the bane of our problem today. So if you really want to improve job creation situation, it is the productive sector, it is agriculture, it is the industry. So if you bring policies that affect it, then you have a challenge. So we are engaging government now, and we are actually pushing that the benchmark value should be reviewed. And even more importantly, I mean, I think it's important to make this point. We are not asking for a total withdrawal of that policy.
Selective.
We are talking of selective products that we have local capacity to produce. There are certain products, like some of the machines you have here, we are not producing them in this country. If you want to reduce the price, you want to reduce the duty on it so that the price will come down for consumers, we have no problem. But products that we have local capacity to produce, there's no point reducing the benchmark values. It runs into hundreds of millions a month that government is losing. And it's all part of the revenue mobilization effort that we need to make. Because if you really want to mobilize revenue to develop, then imports becomes critical. And as I said, you can use all these as tools to develop your local industries. So we're actually asking that we seriously...
In terms of your current state, as in the stability, do you see yourself, that growth going into next year, or still things are going to be flat? Because it looks like demand have picked up, and that is impacting on inflation. People are now demanding a lot of things. In the US and other countries, they are warning us that your Christmas toys, you won't get them.
Yeah, so demand is picked up.
So why
how are you satisfying the demand?
How is industries not cashing into that?
Yes, how can you cash in when your imports are becoming cheaper? You are becoming uncompetitive in your market, so you can't cash in. And that is a challenge we have. So you need to have policies.
Consumers are rational.
The consumers are rational. When they go to the market, we look for the cheapest possible price. Of course, once the quality and all the other factors are equal, you buy the cheaper ones. So it's an opportunity that is being created in terms of growth in demand. But to take advantage of it, you need to have all these other policies also in the right place. Otherwise, you will not be able to take
Prof, there's pressure on government to do something about petroleum taxes. Are we going to see the minister do more robbing Peter to pay Paul? Yes, I'll take it off, but I'll find a way to bring it somewhere else. To satisfy that section of the market to think that that is the best approach to deal with the situation. Some are saying that, listen, we've made some windfall revenue, we budgeted X amount, you're running into 80s. I sometimes ask myself, I'm the layman, I don't know anything about economics. It looks like a lot of inflows have come in. What is happening?
Yeah, a lot of inflows have come in, but
where are they going?
Government is also expanding. The size of government is
Why don't they put the brakes on when we are not having the required revenue to support the expenditure?
Well, look, the government doesn't have that luxury. There are various competing interests, right? And over a certain period of time, you could see certain structural deficiencies that we have carried along throughout.
Who cause some? I mean, why promise
all of that
when the funds are not there to support that promise?
Well, the election plays a role. I mean, the former president was talking about 2020 election, right? I'm sure he's also talking from experience, right? So you could look at what happened in 2008, what happened in 2012, what happened in 2016, and all of that. So all these things, but unfortunately, a lot of these things do not go to the productive sectors of the economy to enhance the cash flow generation capacity of the economy, and therefore, at the end of the day, we end up in this kind of fix. And over a long period, you realize that we haven't been collecting sufficient tax revenue. It just didn't start. I mean, successful government and all of that.
We know, I get worried when we talk about revenue, because we know those who are not paying their taxes. We know where the loopholes are.
Yeah, we know.
Why can't we deal with them?
In fact, there's insufficient empirical evidence about these gaps and all of that across various sectors and all of that, and across the various tax handles and all of that, okay? And a bit of that, I think we are making some progress. If you look at the digitization, and now you will get notification from EcoBank or other this thing that you can now sit in the comfort of your
registered general department.
Yes, and all of that. I mean, this we should have been doing this in like 20 years ago and all of that. But I think it's important that we are infusing all of this in there. We have to sustain that. But of course, there will be a pushback, right? Because some of these things we started in the late 90s. Digitization and some of those things, but there were considerable pushback, and then we abandoned them.
Still on my question about petroleum taxes, what should be the way forward? Are we going to see the minister being smart by taking the taxes off, but it will be introduced in another area?
Well, I'm curious what government would do with that one, because that is also an important revenue handle for the government, okay? And of course, there's also pressure building up and all of that. Even if you look at how much we are paying, and then relative to other countries, you realize that really there's more to it than just the world oil price. There's also a bit, but there's also a bit about the exchange rate and all of that. But unfortunately, when things are bad and they have to push it down our throat, there's enough reason to do so. But when things improve to the extent that the consumer benefit, we don't see that coming. I think that's where people are coming from and all of that. But it's all because we have always been on the side where government has been running deficit, and therefore if there's any windfall, chances are that there are other these things and all of that. Because if you hear, I mean, labor unions, if you hear this and all of that, district assembly transfers and all of that, it's just not easy. But of course, they said they can do it, and so we expect that.
I'll be coming back to get your thoughts on the political economy a bit as well, the focus, social interventions, expenditure, and whether we should look at another austere budget going into 2022.
In fact, if you look at the outlook, everything is austerity.
Well, there's a difference between the reality and talking it as well. This is PM Express Business Edition. It's 2022 budget, speaking to Professor Wilfred Bobkin and also the Chief Executive Association of Ghana Industries. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. It's 2022 budget coming up on Wednesday in Parliament. What are your expectations and the challenges ahead? Welcome to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the budget 2022 that the Finance Minister will be presenting. What are the challenges that lies ahead for us as an economy, and what should be the critical sectors that the Finance Minister should be focusing on when he goes to Parliament to present? I have Professor Godfrey Bobkin. He's an economist and finance lecturer, University of Ghana Business School, Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries, Sechu Makobwa. We are trying to digest, look through, forecast, and what the green bowl or all those things could tell us what we should be expecting on Wednesday. And it appears to be an interesting thing happening. Now, I stand to be educated. I'm told that the Financial Administration Act requires that the presentation is done not later than the 15th of November. Now, Parliament is also saying that we can't take it on the 15th of November, go to the 17th. I don't know.
For me, this is immaterial. What is important is the content.
But if the law says that it has to be 15, I mean, the effectiveness of the law is at the compliance level.
I see. Okay, interesting.
So, but this is Parliament, so let's see how the
the enforcers of the law act on the law. But let me come back to industries as well about your situation, and it looks like it's quite rough for you. And I don't know that now anything can be done about your tax situation. Because there appears to be some tax on tax, which is compounding your cost of production. And the interesting thing is that the Statistical Service is now saying that in terms of local inflation, it's quite high compared to import inflation.
You see, what is happening, and you see, the whole thing is this. We believe that the productive sector must be supported if you are talking of long-term revenue generation.
Cost of production shooting up?
Cost of production is high, and some of it relates to the kind of policy and tax regime we have. Last year, we introduced, in fact, 2 years ago, we introduced a particular tax that we said was not the best, and that has to do with the straight levy. What the straight levy tax did was that it's on the VAT. When you charge VAT, you recover it. Okay, it was 17.5%, so you recover. Because the incidence of the tax is not on you, the producer, it's on the final consumer. We are only collecting it on behalf of government. Then we introduced the straight levy and said, now if you impose the 17.5, you can only recover 12.5. The 5% becomes a levy. Then this year, we even increased it by 1%. So the levy of 6% is on local manufacturers. How would they survive? They must pass it on in the form of higher prices. The challenge is that when you pass it on, then you also lose competition. So your market share is going down. So then you have a challenge. And that's why we become so import dependent. So we are importing large volumes into our country. Now look at what is happening. With the COVID situation, freight has gone up significantly. In fact, the freight charge for a typical 20-footer container was around $600, $800. Now it's going to about $2,500. For 40-footer, it was around $1,200. Now it's going to about $6,500. It's more than quadrupled. And it is a challenge because when you are so import dependent and all your goods are coming from abroad, this freight cost must be passed on to the consumers because
so they don't have
enough local production. So if we really want to improve the economic situation, we believe that review some of these taxes, make sure that the productive sector is highly supported, let them produce at competitive levels so that they can actually satisfy the market and reduce your imports. Because your import bill is so high, a lot of the foreign currency that we are generating, we are paying it back in the form of, imports.
Prof, do you want us to look more of an austere budget? I mean, it is, but the reality is that what is the minister going to communicate to us? Should we look at a more austere budget rather?
So if you look at the debt levels, the fiscal unsustainability and all of that, it's almost predictable that is the way you have to go, some kind of...
Or will he communicate that?
We're already doing some form of it, right? Fiscal consolidation, okay, and all of that. So, and if you look at the outlook, okay, the next 2, 3, 4 years and all of that, you see the budget cuts, except to the extent that when it comes to interest payments, when it comes to compensation and all of that. But the real allocations to the critical sectors of the economy, particularly agriculture and the rest of them, where there's higher multiplier, he talked about that. So spending in the area of agriculture and agribusiness has a high inequality reducing effect, okay, and employment generation, higher employment generation effect. But we can't do more from that because we don't have that unless we are able to significantly increase the revenue generation, which we have not been able to do. So, and if you look at from the international community, okay, the IMF and the World Bank and all of that, I think you realize that there's a certain push that supports some level of austerity to contain the debt level.
The minister, we spoke to him recently, and he spoke about the fact that the budget will be heavy on job creation and entrepreneurship. Are you worried? I mean, for some to say that this is not a budget the minister should go in making promises, because we know what has happened with NACOP and all the rest, and there's this youth bank and all the rest. The priority now is that look at stabilizing things and more of an austere situation. When things get better, that expansionary budget can then be pushed.
So the Minister of Finance has to respond to different competing
That's the
interests.
political economy bit which I want to get your thoughts
yes,
on.
and all of that, okay? So those who are concerned about your debt level, investors and all that, are looking at a certain response in a certain way. But there's also a push from the local economy in terms of unemployment. And the biggest threat to our democracy today is unemployment. Okay, and you see,
but Prof, what has happened to the other programs that were introduced? So the NACOB and all the rest, and the youth in agriculture and all the rest.
And that is why
don't go in and introduce new programs, but fix the old
And then we have to be moderate with our promises, because we have seen many of these in the last couple of years. We promise big and deliver little and all of that. So that's the issue. But if you want to address the issue of the job creation and all of them, he's talked about it. If the local manufacturing sector, okay, is uncompetitive, and people realize that importing is much cheaper and it guarantees their margin rather than producing it from here. I mean, nobody loves Ghana to that extent. Look, these people don't love labor. These people love their margins and their profits. If they see the need to expand, then they will recruit people.
Let me get a quick thought from industry on that. Do you think that, listen, government says the public sector is full. Listen, incentivize industry and let us employ them.
I think the Minister of Finance put it right when he said the public sector is full.
It's full for some people.
It's
full for majority.
I'm saying that doesn't think the government should rather incentivize, not necessarily handouts, but listen, what are the problems of industry? Give them the space to expand. When industries are, listen, you read stories in America today about them saying, listen, they need people. Some of them have even hiked the wage rate.
In the UK,
so
and
when things are good, I don't see a business where he has so much profits available, doesn't want to hire fresh hands.
The point is simple. Private sector should be the source of job creation. So government says the public sector is choked. And it is true. We are only employing about 650,000 people. What are the millions of people that are coming out of our universities? You know, we have more than 300,000 people coming from our tertiary institutions alone every year. Why are they going to be absorbed? How many of them can government absorb? And therefore, the private sector is actually the engine of growth. That's where the jobs are created. The private sector, there are certain areas that are job creation areas, highly job growth areas. Agriculture is one. Industry is critical. If you link agric and industry effectively, you can create the jobs. That's why incentives for industrial production is critical. And that's why we talked about some of the policies that are inimical to industry. We think they should be reviewed in this particular budget, so that you can show up industry. Bear in mind that we also have the Continental Free Trade Agreement with us. That presents a big opportunity because we can have access to bigger markets. But it also presents a huge threat because we are opening our doors. Duty-free, quota-free entry of goods coming from different parts of Africa. Some of the countries are more advanced than us in industrialization. Egypt, the Egyptians, the South Africa, the Moroccans, and some of those countries. Kenyans, and they will flood your market. So this is not the time to weaken your industry. It's rather the time to strengthen them. If they are strong and they are competitive, they can consolidate their market share in Ghana and then also export to other markets. And therefore, I think that if you really want to create jobs, productive sector is key. Industry, agriculture is very important. Today, the GDP is driven by the service sector. Service is contributing more than all the other sectors. Service is important, but if you have a service that is not supported by growth in industry, you only have a stunted growth. A growth that is not job creation related.
Jobless growth.
It's a jobless growth. So you have the numbers. High rates of growth.
GDP shooting up.
7%,
happiness index very low.
Excited about it. But how many jobs are we creating? Because the banking sector, the telecom sector, these are all very important sectors, but they don't grow the jobs for us. If you visit any small garment factory, whose revenue or output is, something not so big, they're employing 100 people, 150 people.
Along the value chain.
Along the value chain. So you need to develop all this and make it work. And if it works very well, you'll be surprised the kind of jobs you'll be creating.
Prof, do you think that the minister should go low? And again, the bit about the promises. And listen, let people understand the true state of the economy. You bring people along and move along with the austerity bit so that it helps you, because the revenues are not coming and they won't come right now.
So there is a tendency to respond to that pressure by promise big, right? And that is where the pressure comes back to the same government when, when mid-year, thereabout, there is no show and all of that, and the jobs are not coming, and the students are exiting the tertiary institutions, and there are no jobs, even if they majored in job creation in the university. And the rest. But then you're also looking at the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem and make it a bit more supportive. But we are not there. We are not there. And if you look at a lot of the policies, you realize that we have not taken a comprehensive view of all of this and see how the various policies, tax level and all of that are actually heading in a certain direction that guarantees private sector leadership that can create the much needed jobs for us. And it's not only us. Look, Sub-Saharan Africa annually needs to create 20 million decent jobs. We are doing between 2 to 3 million. So look at the deficit. Okay, and the top 4 out of the 5 countries globally with higher unemployment rate are in Africa, led by South Africa, Namibia, Nigeria, Angola, and the rest of them. Unemployment rate in this. So, and then we are talking about the African Continental Free Trade Movement of business persons and the rest of them. So I think that, and we have to be gradual, and that is why I think that we have to be moderate and be realistic. Why am I saying so? Because some of these things we are talking about are not things that one-year budget can deliver on the table. No. Okay. Because if you look at where your deficit level is, it's going to take you more than 2-3 years to actually descend from where you are. And to do so would impose cost in the short term. And these costs are going to be borne by the private sector. So when your debt levels are high, it signals uncertainty about hiking taxes and all of that. So the government is in the fix, right?
But I think strategy-wise, it's not too bad. Government strategy on industrialization and like the 1D, 1F, planting for food and jobs, and you could see that there's been significant growth in agricultural output, for example, its contribution to GDP.
The fair 2017, 2018, but you can check what is happening now.
Yes. Well, I mean, whatever it is the strategy that they laid out was not bad. Is the sustainability of the strategy is key. Now we have a number of factories established within this period. How do we ensure that those factories established will grow and then expand and employ more people? If we get it right, eventually we'll get there. But the ability to implement effectively some of these strategies is a challenge. And the aspect of the policies that eventually becomes a counterproductive to some of the strategies we've developed is our biggest challenge. You have good policies, good strategies, but then you bring in policies that counter it. So that's where we have to look at.
Let me get back to Prof and as we try and round up. For you, going into next year, what will be the key challenge out there?
It's still going to be revenue generation.
And how should this budget try to deal with some of these things? So
we'll be interested to see the kind of measures that government will put in place to ensure greater compliance and scale up the revenue generation. We will be interested. Look, even if you sign up for an IMF program, whatever, it will still be down to you. It will still be down to you doing what you have to do. Okay, and the more we defer, the more it's going to escalate and all. So we are all interested, and I believe that, look, the reason I say there's some level of hope is because government is aware, and government has to respond. And I think the 2022 budget provides an important platform, a strategic platform for government to respond and provide some kind of a path in terms of fiscal sustainability that anchors expectation and hope for us. Because when investors, because some way, somehow, we're going to go to the capital market, right?
They're responding already.
Yeah. So once investors perceive that the default level is, the probability of default will go up, they will hold that for a higher yield by seeking higher protection from the perceived default.
And the bond market has already started going up.
So, so if you look at, what I read was about 800 basis points or so and all of that. So they're going to punish you. It's just like coming onto the market unattractive, right? They will punish you. These investors, they are not NGOs.
They're already reacted. No. Mr. Kobo, your last words going into this budget presentation, if you have any advice for the minister, 30 seconds as he crossed the T's and dot the I's. Industry, what are you going to tell him?
I believe the industry holds the key to job creation. Government's number one challenge is creating jobs for the masses. And therefore, if industry holds the key to that, then your budget program should really support industry. And I believe between industry and agriculture, if we do proper linkages, we can create the jobs that we need. Therefore, in this budget, we'd like to see the incentive that is being given to industry. We'd like to see the reforms in tax regime that is supportive of industrialization. I think if we get it right, we should be able to make the impact that we want.
Getting it right.
And indeed, if you look at it, investor confidence in Ghana is not bad. If you look at the statistics from the GIPC, there's more investment coming into Ghana, and therefore, if we channel it to the right productive areas, eventually we'll create the jobs that we need. But it should be seriously supported by the fiscal regime, and the strategy and the policies should also be directing towards productive sector.
Prof, 30 seconds. What is your biggest fear going to this budget presentation? 30 seconds.
It's the fact that we are so some level of credibility in there, because what we promised that we'll do, we are unable to do that. If you look at the report from Bank of Ghana in terms of the quarterly target and all of that, we are way behind. So we have to be able to close that gap.
I know the debate will go on in your offices, in your homes, about whether this budget will bring about some real change in your lives, bring about the stability, grow the economy, and offer some confidence to you. This is PM Express Business Edition. We are waiting for what the minister will bring on Wednesday when he goes to Parliament to present the 2022 budget. Well, we look forward to that. Have a great day.